Hi, this is Bill Kerr, and I'm going to show you the process of me cutting and insetting the giant circles from our inner circle quilt, which is featured in Modern Quilts Illustrated number 12. To begin with, I've pieced all of the light strips, as you see on the left, and that's going to be the top out of which we cut the holes. To the right, you'll see the darker teals with the darker teal solid. That's a narrower section, and from that we're going to cut the big dark circles that get insert in the holes from the left. And then the last thing is I've downloaded and printed out the pages of the templates. What I'm going to do now is walk you through how I prepare those. I'm starting with that one on the upper right of the quilt, and it prints out on 10 sheets. And on the first sheet there's an assembly diagram, and on each of the sheets there's a smaller piece that's going to get cut out. Now I'm going to cut each of these out. If you want to use your ruler to cut, you can. However, I find that I can just cut right along the pieces really fairly accurately. We're going to tape these all together, and if something's off by a millimeter or something, it's not going to make a big difference. So for instance, I've just cut out this first piece, and there are 12 different pieces for this one template. We're going to have 3 different templates. I'm just using this first one right now. And the way I've set it up for you, the templates are used first to cut the big dark green circle, or part of a circle that's going to get pieced in, and then it gets reused to cut the whole. So here shows you, like, I have piece 1 and piece 2. And one of the nice things is I've put little registration marks along this. And as you go along, you just line up the edges, and with a little tape, just tape them together. And I'll just do 3 of these right now to show you, and then I'll turn off the camera and cut the rest to prepare it. And again, these circles have so much stretch because they're actually 3 feet in diameter, finished circles. So if you're just a little off, it's not a big deal at all. And again, I can refer to my first page if I'm curious and I don't remember exactly where the pieces go, but they're all numbered, and I think it's really quite clear. Don't hesitate to use a lot of tape just to hold it together well. So I've got those 3. I'm going to finish this off camera. It went together really nicely. The 12 pieces taped together, and I've got a nice template for that upper right-hand section I'm going to do. And as I was cutting it, I thought of a couple other tips to mention. One, with any templates that we ever do, you'll notice on the first page, there's always a test square that says measure to make sure this is 1 inch. And that's really important because every printer works differently, but most printers have a little option that says scale to fit page or shrink to fit. And it's really important that you never check that you actually make sure that you're printing the templates 100% actual size. Because some printers try to maximize and squeeze and shrink things to fit the page size of the paper you have. So we always put that test square, because if you measure it and it's 1 inch, as it should be, then you know that it's printed at actual size. If it's larger or smaller, that indicates that you had some checkbox printed in your print dialog box that allowed the printer to either enlarge or reduce it to fit the page size. And I've scaled each of these pieces so it will print on a standard US 8.5 by 11 or European or Asian A4 paper size. So it's scaled to fit standard printer paper, and it prints quite easily. So I've got that all done, And the other thing, I told you, I cut all my curves freehand. I did find it was faster to cut the straight pieces with a ruler. So whatever you prefer to do, but with the curves, freehanding is just fine. And if you find that you make a bad mistake, you can always reprint that sheet or all the sheets and redo it. But I think it'll work quite well. And I'm using just plain old paper. I know some people are used to working with heavy cardstock or template plastic, but each of these you're just going to be cutting once, so there's no real need for heavyweight template material. And what I'm going to do next is show you how I'm going to use this to cut out my circle and how I'm going to align it. So I'm going to move down to the floor to do that in just a moment. Now, in this next step, what I've just done is I've taken the piece that I've just cut out and I've laid it on top. And what I'm going to do is I'm starting by lining it up, and then I'm kind of going around and squeezing and pushing a bit. In the final sewing, the goal is to get every one of these strips to line up. And the reality is, you know, your seam allowances shift a bit and they may not line up perfectly, but with a little pushing and pulling, I can get it really, really close, and I'm going to be able to sew that in so it gives the illusion that it comes right in like that. And so then this is where the chalk pencil is really important. I'm going to chalk right where this kind of falls. It's easiest to see the chalk on top of the solid, so I'm chalking there. And chalking, chalking, chalking. And then what I'm doing is I'm peeling this away, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to get my template one more time, and I'm going to line it up right with that chalked edge. And you'll find that the chalked edge and my little dashes that I drew earlier should, in theory, kind of come close to lining up nicely. You know, they may not be perfect, but they should be pretty close. And so I'm going to adjust that the best I can. Knowing that there's a little push and pull that's going to have to happen. But the important thing here that I really do want to stress is whether or not that lines up perfectly. You know, again, with the flexibility of fabric, I think we'll be able to get this all to work. But when cutting this next piece out, what's going to be really different is I'm going to cut, this is the hole, which needs to be smaller. So I'm cutting it along the dashed line here. So I'm cutting the dashed line. And again, these don't all line up as perfectly as you might want, but they're with the stretch of the fabric, I think I'll be able to pin everything nicely in place. That's the goal. That's one of the advantages of having such really large pieces. So I'm going to move this away. Lots for the recycling here. And one of the cool things, when I remove this piece, I'm going to hang on to these circles I pull out, because I could do something really cool, like piece them into a backing, or I could cut them up and make decorative pillows out of them. But now you can begin to really see what's going to happen. So what I did off camera is I went ahead and I pinned the circle in, and I want to show you just how I did that. We press all of our seams open, which makes pinning very easy. I took pins and I slid them between the solid strip and the print, 1/4 inch in from the edge, put it right in between, and then right through to the other strip, right where the solid and the print come together. So basically, what I'm trying to do is put pins right where the final seam is going to be, 1/4 inch in. That way you get the strips to line up perfectly. Okay, now it's time to piece this very large curve. And I'm going to be piecing with the flat light side down. That will make it much easier to sew, because if I had the dark circle down, I could get more puckers because it's the larger piece. So I'm just going to do this, start sewing, and I'm sewing using a walking foot. That's just my preference. It feeds the fabric evenly. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm aiming to get my seam exactly where I've pinned, right at 1/4 inch in, pulling out the pin right as I get there, because if I can get my seam right where the pin was, it will make sure that those solid strips, the light and the dark teal, line up really nicely. Okay. And it's a big circle, so it'll take a moment, and you know, I'm not in any rush here. Just trying to go bit by bit, making sure everything's nicely lined up. And again, it's a very big piece, so I've got to do a lot of shifting it around as I go so it doesn't get all bunched up. And I'm going to be doing this exact same process for all 3 of the curves. And every now and then I'm going to be lifting my presser foot to just redistribute the fabric that's under it. Because when you have a large curve, sometimes it gathers underneath. And another good tip when you're dealing with a really large, cumbersome piece like this is to make sure you start with a full bobbin, because it's such a pain to run out of bobbin thread halfway through a curve like this. So just check that before you begin. And if you're uncertain, you can sew part of the curve and pull it out and see how it's going. I'm pretty confident that this is going pretty well. But if there's something I don't like, I can always get out the seam ripper and adjust the seam. But I think we're in good shape here. And again, I'm just visualizing where that seam goes, because I know my pins have accurately anchored the 1/4 inch seams. So I'm going to just finish this up, and then I'll press it open and show you how it looks. So here I've pinned it up on the design wall really quickly, and everything lined up nicely. Then I went back, and over the next day or so I cut out and inserted the other 2 circles, and this is the finished quilt. We cut the leftover fabric from the circles into bands that we pieced into the back. If you'd like to buy the magazine with the pattern, please visit modernquiltstudio.com.